Hey everyone, my name is Carmelo and this is Fingers of Fury. So today I'm going to do a bit of a different video. I just kind of wanted to talk about a couple things, both of them unrelated to each other, but one of them is 3D printed climbing holds and just maybe climbing holds in general. I plan on doing some footholds coming up, and I have 3D printed a lot of climbing holds in the past. And then I just want to talk about my company, more so my brand and kind of what I'm trying to do with my brand, but I'll talk about that later. So I just wanted to talk about 3D printed holds just because I've been asked a bunch of times about the 3D printed holds on my wall, and I always said I would do some sort of video on how I do it. So I've got a good amount of holds on the board, and then I picked out some holds that I've made years ago and ones that I've made more recently, and I can talk about a little bit of the journey that I went on to make climbing holds, because I climbed for years before I made my first climbing hold, and what I realized very quickly, at least for where I went with it initially, is that a lot more goes into a climbing hold than I originally thought. At least I thought it could be oversimplified to an almost extreme extent. And what I mean by that is I made holds right off the bat that I had chosen to use 3D printing to make my holds because I had a 3D printer and I have a design experience, and I really thought that what you could do is 3D print a hold that was basically just an edge. Get an edge that's 20 millimeter, maybe a 10 millimeter, then you can take the angle, make it in cut, make it slightly slopey or whatever, and that's all there is to an edge, is that you've got your radius that wraps around it. It can be flat, it doesn't matter for training. And boy, was I wrong. I made really bad holds, and one of the biggest reasons was I made them flat on the sides. These are pretty flat, but there's a huge radius on it, and I made it like perfectly fitting to the hand. I'm not going to talk about how bad those holds were for much longer, but basically I've gone on kind of a journey where I went from parametric design, meaning parameter based, to a more direct modeling where it could be more freeform and stuff, back to parametric. And I'd like to touch on real quick why I'd like to be parametric, and it is kind of going back to the size of the edge, the in cut, and all that. But really, I think the main advantage, especially when you're not using a screw, what are they, the 3/8 or a 10 millimeter, I believe, is the standard T-nut size holds. I don't have any of them on my board. It's set screws strictly, so I don't remember the bolt size, the screw size. But in any case, I can design a hold. Say I design this hold, I don't like it, but it's real close. I do want to make it bigger, smaller, or whatever. I can still model the next hold around this screw pattern and put the new one on my wall in the same exact spot, and not just Swiss cheese a bunch of holds in my wall. I can replace them. I can also, this one has a texture. I don't know if it will come up on camera, but it's a bit of a macro texture, and I'm sorry for the bloody finger. I cut myself pulling this out, but it's got a bit of a macro texture, let's call it, to it that I put on here. And so that's something that I can mess with it as well. So for iterating on a hold design, it's really nice to do a parametric design because you've got parameters that you can change on the fly. So I've got a bunch of holds that are actually very similar. This is a bigger hold, but basically it's the same as this, scaled down. So you can scale them down, but then what you can do is, I don't know if this will show up on camera, but and actually I might make a liar of myself, but I thought one of these was more in-cut than the other, and I can change this radius very easily, and I could make it sloping. I wouldn't for a 45-degree wall like I have, but I might have more in here that are different. And what you can see, actually, that I made the 3D printer, this one here, see if it will focus. You can see the texture on that one, and I printed this one, no texture. You can see how shiny it is. So you can experiment with texture, and these can be swapped out for each other, which a lot of times when people are carving something out of foam for the master mold, they're not necessarily, I don't think, using like a standardized screw pattern. So the standardized screw pattern is really nice, and then obviously being able to really quickly iterate on your design is really nice. But so again, I know I'm going to drone on for a while if I keep this up, so I'm going to move on to some kind of tricks on making it as strong as possible. And so what I will mention is that you want to get your screw holes as close to where you're going to grab on the edge as possible. So as forward or as up, in this orientation to where you actually grab onto. And then when you put a screw hole in it, you don't want to sink it in too far into the hole. You want to leave them as close to this top face as possible. And what that's going to do is the screw is going to be able to act as like a rebar, like a reinforcement to this hole. Because when you 3D print it in this orientation and the layers are running this way, it's very easy, or it's much less strong in this vertical direction. So if you sink some screws and let it squeeze down on the entirety of the hold or most of it, you're going to reinforce that hold and make it much stronger. And again, that with moving the screws as close to the hand or the where the fingers grab it as possible, you're gonna be able to make the hold be as strong as it can be for a 3D printed hold. PLA, I don't have any numbers off the top of my head, but PLA, the most common and most easily printed and cheapest material, I believe is a similar strength to the polyurethane most people use for casting climbing holds. Don't quote me on that, I might be wildly off base there, but I believe it's close enough. But that is in this orientation here. I don't believe it's in that perpendicular direction. So that's where it's going to be a good idea to do that trick with the screws. Then in addition to that, you don't have to print excessive amount of walls. And if you're already experienced in 3D printing, you already know what I'm talking about, but this hold is basically hollow. There's a slight support structure inside, and the wall thickness is a global parameter for when you're slicing it, so when you're printing it out. So you get to choose how thick the walls of this part is. But that applies also to the walls of these screw holes. So if you have like a 3 wall, you just get to give it a number, and then the number multiplies based on your nozzle thickness, and that will be how thick your walls end up being. So a 3 wall perimeter with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle is going to be different than if you did a 0.6. But so what you can do is, because the slicer is a global setting, you can trick it into putting more walls underneath this screw head. So you don't want just 3 walls, for example, down running beneath this screw, because when you sink this screw in, there's not going to be any support underneath that screw head. But if you trick it to think that there's more walls underneath that screw, then you can make it however thick as you want, just in those areas. So it's a way to add strength to a 3D print, but not globally like you would have to in the slicer settings by either adding a tighter infill or more walls. You can do this third thing, which is just in particular places choose to reinforce certain spots. So in this case, the rest of the climbing hole doesn't need more walls or more reinforcement, and you don't really want a tighter infill or anything like that. You really just want the support underneath the screws. And this trick can go for I 3D print my prototypes for my stuff, and you could do it. For instance, the highest amount of stress is going to be on this eyelet here. So if you were 3D printing something that looked like my products in a 3D printed material, obviously you can reinforce around this eyelet only, and you could run, you could add some additional walls on the inside of this part as well, hide them inside, and that would add some strength. So it's a trick that you can do. So other than that, you can see, I will mention that I've messed with bead blasting plastic. I don't know if this will show up, but it gives it, I'm going to give it a second to try and focus, see if this happens. There we go. So you might be able to see that pretty good. This feels like, to me, it feels like old climbing holds, in that, like, you go to a gym where they haven't changed the climbing holds in like 10 years. It kind of feels like that. And I actually love it. I think that's the the perfect texture to it. I don't know if my mic will pick up on that. So yeah, that's 3D printed climbing holds for me. I've gone to trying to make them as simple as possible. I went to the other direction. I'm trying to meet somewhere in the middle and create a set of climbing holds that do everything that I want them to do. So I'm looking for, I think, the smallest form factor a hold can be and still do what it needs to do, you know, for whatever you want to, for a crimp, a sloper. Why am I drawing a blank on climbing holds? But so you get the idea there. You know, some different climbing hold examples that are easy. It's kind of like a down climb jug sort of hold. But anyways, I want to take you for a quick tour of my wall. It's nothing special, but I can point out some holds that I've made in the past that have been up there for years. And I'll show you my footholds, or at least one of them. I think I only have one left and I gave the rest away. But so I'll bring you in there and let's do that. All right, so here's the wall. And I made this wall when I was living in Somerville, Massachusetts, which is right outside Boston, which is you know, the city around here, but I built it in a backyard, so it's kind of janky, but that was the intention back when I built it. And what I like about it is I don't care about it. So I've been Swiss cheesing this board, just experimenting with stuff for a while, and I don't mind because it's very low effort. So I thought it might be a good idea to maybe start from the top and go down to the bottom. So here is one of the holds that you saw earlier. And again, there is some variation in these. I don't remember what I was changing on each one, but I love these. They're pretty small. See if I can bring it down here. They're not too small, 3/4 of a pad maybe. I forget how big they are, but these are usable on a 45, which I like. Again, I also don't remember the angle, but they feel really good. There's another one here. Let's see if I can find. So there's, again, another one here that seems the same. And then there's these. I was experimenting with holds that look like this. I like these holds. They have a ton of texture on it. So I was trying that hold basically with less texture. And again, these are very easily changeable. Basically all the holds that I've shown are based on spheres and you know, transformations done on spheres to make these holds. So here is one where I think this one's more in cut, but there's no texture on it. So that one's a bit different. And then I think these ones are savagely hard for me. This hold looks really good, but basically ends up being a pinch on this wall. It's totally flat here. This is really in cut. So this is a super jug. You can fit 2 hands on it if you need. Let me see. These have been on the wall for forever. So these have lasted maybe 5 years on here. So no appreciable damage or wear on them at all. And so I'm gonna bring you down and talk about footholds. So I'm not actually planning on making any handholds anytime soon. That would be a very long-term project. And you can see there's tons of bugs in my garage for whatever reason. But so here's an example of one of the footholds. This has no texture on it. I wasn't actually doing any texturing back when I made these. But anyways, I really, really like the Power Company footholds. So they're all fairly bad, you know, especially with these down here. They're incredibly bad as my camera decides to not focus. Thanks, camera. So I made these, or started making these, again, super inspired by Chris Hampton's work on these holds. And it wasn't that I was trying to copy these, it's that I want to go from here. I want to make some other holds that make sense to be made in aluminum. So I'm not going to be trying to make holds maybe this big in aluminum, but it makes total sense to be making holds this small because they're going to be much stronger. Why they need to be strong? Well, here's a hold obviously in polyurethane that's broken. I've taken them off, but there's anywhere where there's screw holes where it looks like there used to be a hold. I haven't taken any footholds off of this board and changed them around ever. So quick note to the viewers, it was just videotaping that, and I got a card error, as an SD card error on the camera. So if there's an abrupt lapse in the video there, that's why. So I'm going to take you back in and try and wrap this up as far as me rambling on about climbing holds or climbing footholds. So basically, yeah, I've been wanting to do a set of footholds, so like a fairly big set. So I have, what I was showing off there are what I was calling the shurikens back then. Again, this is pre Fingers of Fury when I was making those. I didn't really have an idea other than I had a lapse in the work I was doing at the time here at my own personal machine shop, and I wanted to make some footholds, and I did that. And I really only made that one flavor, let's call it. I did a non-in-cut and an in-cut version, and there's some tooling that I want to develop basically for climbing footholds, for milling it to go on and continue making more climbing holds. So I may 3D print those, is where this kind of ties into test, and then machine some climbing footholds that can stay on my board or anyone else's board who wants some footholds that will absolutely never break, no matter how small they are. And then also uniquely, I can do a few things to mess with texture. Obviously, bead blasting is an option, and the guys over at Peacemaker have made CNC milled aluminum footholds before as well, and you can see on those there's another texturing option, which I could do that, but I have a couple ideas for texturing options. So footholds to come. I'm not sure what to call them because I started a business called Fingers of Fury. So when you start making footholds, what does that mean? So is it Feats of Rage is a name I've been throwing around. Maybe it's like a sister company, but that's a bit silly because I want to make other climbing products. So maybe it's all under Fingers of Fury, but that's a thought in the back of my head.
All right, so I finally figured out how to do this screen recording thing. So here we are. I've preloaded everything, and I'm just going to show this off real quick. So I've got a hold here, and I've done a section of it. And in this section, we can see that I've got these cutouts here that are very small. I'm zooming into them now, obviously, so you can see them. But again, that creates, a wall on either side of this, on these cuts, these cuts that I put into the part. So one thing to note, if and when you do this, is that, and I gotta grab this arrow here, Fusion 360, for anyone that knows, I updated it recently, and I don't remember this happening before, but it just gives me this rotation instead of the linear move. But anyways, so rather than have that cut all the way through, you want to seal off this face when you're done. But other than that, that's basically it. So again, this is a real simple hold design, and you can see by the tree, I'm still trying to make this as simple as possible. Sorry about that. Let me bring it back. So it's not going to show the sketch, but it starts off as a sphere. So you might not have understood what I said before when I said these are all based on a sphere. So here I'm drawing a sphere, and in this sketch, I've got that sphere defined, obviously. And then I'm just doing different Boolean operations to bring this down to near net shape here. And you can do a few more operations. This is basically the hold, and then I define by putting in a sketch to add the holes in there. And again, I think I actually forgot to describe this, but the way that I do this operation is, okay, so I'm not trying to make this video too long, and I didn't figure out what was going on with that hold. So this is a very slightly different hold. So again, there's something going on there where I was missing this. So this is what I call the screw representation, but basically what this does is it's not actually a representation of the screw, but of the feature, the positive feature that will become the negative feature after that Boolean cutting operation is done. So this is what is left by using this as a combine cut feature. But then I also add in these near zero walls. And so when you do that, so you end up with those cuts that I showed you. And then what happens when you bring it into your slicer, is what happens is those walls are so small is it can't actually create that teeny tiny gap. So what it does is it actually just creates a solid infill underneath where you put those features. And you're going to have to experiment with the gaps that you put on there to make it do this. And it looks like there is a teeny tiny gap here, but in real life, this gap just isn't there. It's so infinitesimally small, basically, that in real life, these end up actually running into each other, and this is a solid. So that's how you do that. And again, based on your nozzle diameter, you're going to have to experiment with what that thickness of that cut ends up being and the spacing in between it. And so you have your, let's see in here, I haven't done this I haven't been printing, but here's, shells. Shells is what it's called. I'm calling it walls, but it's actually shell. And I've got 5 and 4 top and bottom. Or actually, I'm sorry. It's the perimeters. I'm talking about the top and the bottom layers there. I meant to say perimeters, and it's 3. And then that's backed up by seeing it here. You've got one outer layer, which is done at a different speed. So that's orange. And the 2 yellow layers, which are done at a faster speed. So those are yellow there. So this is like 3 times that. So you can see that I've added a lot more wall or solid thickness material underneath where the screw goes. So when you put the screw down in here and screw it in, obviously, and suck down the hold into it, if there was just a small, teeny tiny wall underneath it, the screw is going to sink in because there's basically no support there, because there's this infill. And again, you don't want to make this a solid thickness hold. That's just a waste of material, isn't going to add any strength really. So this is the best way to do it. You can see it keeps the cost down low as well. So there's actually some other tricks that I'm not going to go into right now. I just didn't think of it as I was doing it. And it looks like, I think I've got multiple versions of this part where maybe I do move the screws a little bit forward, but when you do have a steeper angle, obviously the screw ends up at least looking like it's further back than it really is, but this actually isn't too crazy far away. But this could definitely for sure move up here, and that would make this hold a bit stronger. So that's the basic trick. I'm not going to get too much into it. I think if you know the basics of what you're doing, you've seen enough to take this on your own and use it for your own 3D printed holds. But I think that'll help some people out.
Okay, so the second thing I want to talk about is Fingers of Fury as a brand. So for one thing is, from the beginning, I wanted to do something very cohesive, have a lot of continuity through the entire brand. So there's a lot of stuff that I'd like to talk about, but I'm not exactly the right person. But like brand language, like a brand color palette and stuff are all things that I'm working with or working towards. And I've done like a mood board and all these other things. And so talking to anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about more than I do, like a graphic designer, an industrial designer, designers in general outside of engineering will know what I'm talking about and know better what I'm talking about. But basically what I've been trying to do, but trying to do a better job of, is those things. So I did a mood board recently, and basically I chose a color palette, which I've always been on the darker end of the spectrum, so I really like the black and white colorway, but there's nothing else in there. So my contrast color is going to be red from now on. And I talked about it before, but I have a lot of influence that comes from like 90s anime and kung fu movies and stuff. And a lot of that initial imagery came from that. I started using red back then too, but I didn't really know how to use it in a tasteful way. So I ended up with black and white mostly. And the more I looked at color palettes, the more I ended up on black and white and then just barely adding a red to it. So you can do that on websites like Coolers, and I think ultimately end up using a different website. But basically you can choose go through a catalog of different color palettes and choose something that somebody else has already determined kind of looks good. But there's color theory and all these other things that you can go into, and contrast and all this stuff that you can consider. But I went through kind of that whole process, and I really just ended up on a color palette that's very similar than what I was doing before. But I want to get my imagery all very consistent, and my language as well. You can kind of see on the front page there's a picture of me that I took recently, because I've always hated every single front page picture I've put on there. And I also hate my current attempt at having like a what do you call it, a slogan, right? So I have something up there to the effect of "Forge Fingers of Legend" or something, and it kind of goes hand in hand with this kung fu movie sort of influence, but it just sounds corny. I don't know that I won't be corny in the future, but I'm not quite satisfied with the language that I use, you know, throughout advertisements and stuff. So I'm kind of looking for something cohesive, and that's why I've done this mood board. And the mood board isn't the official, let's call it, use of a mood board that I've done. So I'm putting quotes in there and stuff. And I'm doing this talk before because I just don't want to do a screen recording. I have to figure that out right now, but I'll bring you in after I do this video and do a video of me going through what I'm using for a mood board. But I want to take a second and show a couple products to show kind of what I've been thinking as far as brand language as the products go. All right, so back again. And so I'm going to start off by trying to talk about brand language as far as the product design has gone, at least thus far. So I think I've done a pretty good job as far as my product design goes, is keeping a very common brand language throughout all the design. And that can be easy in a lot of ways, where I use the same font on the back of all of the products. And I'm sorry if this doesn't focus in as quick as I would like it to, but so all of them have that nice engraved product, or my brand engraved into it. But then it's a lot of stuff that I try to repeat through the designs. So the chamfer has become a bit of my brand language as well. Sorry about that. I had to do something for a second. So I have a few things that have become part of my brand language. For one is I repeat the same type of chamfer, which is this angled feature on all the faces to break the edge of everything. And so that's consistent through all of them. And then there's some things that you can do on a per product basis. For example, the inside of the Zod ends up with a larger radius on this, just because as you go deeper in depth for a pocket for your fingers, it really necessitates having a larger radius to make it more comfortable to use that pocket, because your fingers go in further and you might end up on that joint. So having a really nice radius on there becomes a necessity. And I did the same radius on the back side here, which may or may not sound obvious, but originally I did try and keep the same radius on the back as what was on the inside of the Baby Boss. Again, seems perfectly obvious, but repeating of features is a thing within product design to keep continuity of a product. And then, so the eyelet is always the same on all the products. And again, you get that engraving on the back. And I think even still too are the inserts. So I have the inserts for the Zod, and you can see as far as how I design them, even though I have to do a totally different shape, I'm keeping a lot of the way that I draw the features on them being the same. So you can kind of tell when I design something now that I designed it. And again, you want somebody to be able to tell that something's yours. So even almost without the engraving on the back, you'll look at something and say that's a Fingers of Fury product. So you can see that the eyelets look the same on all of these. So I've kind of developed that brand language early on. Even with something like these eyelets, let's call them, on the Fifth Element are totally different, but the fact that I'm doing integrated eyelets on all of my products is becoming part of, I don't know if we would call that brand language anymore, or just like brand identity, I think it is wrong as well, but that's all part of it. And so even if you get the chance to repeat like these radii on, so I believe it's the same radius here, for example, that's on the front here, and that just gives it this very cohesive feel to it. So you have all these things that just become Fingers of Fury features basically. So that might be something you recognize. It might not be. And I always love to point out, for some reason, I really love that I got the number 30 there engraved right in the opening that I put for the insert. Just a nice touch, I think. I will point out, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these yet, but I've got the variable edge depth insert in here. And I've been experimenting with that. So that's something Lattice did. So if I like it, credit goes to them on that. If I don't like it, I just won't bring it up, I guess. But so that's brand language as far as the product design goes. So I'd like to go into the other aspects of the business.
Okay, so when it comes to my products, I've talked about brand language and some of the features that I do to give things that I make continuity, cohesiveness, whatever you want to call it. So that all of my products kind of have similar features, and you can really tell that something is a Fingers of Fury product when it's a Fingers of Fury product. And so I don't feel like I do as good of a job on my media, let's say like my Instagram account, my website, my videos, my artwork, and then especially my photography. So this is my website. I chose a theme on Shopify early on that was dark, and I always knew that I wanted to do things in dark colors. I had earlier on I liked black and white. I like black and red. Those are just colors that I like. So I didn't want anything super bright, but really this is basically a stock theme that worked as best as it could for the least amount of time that I was putting into it. So I'll point out some things that I don't like. I'm not super in love with this color palette here, where it's a slightly dark gray, and then a little bit of a lighter dark gray. And then it's just my, talking about brand language, I don't know if this really applies to like slogans and whatnot, but so manufacturer of stronger fingers sounds kind of cool. It's a bit corny, and again, I don't know that I'm not going to be corny in the future. I think that is kind of also going to be on brand for me, but I just don't like the forged fingers of legend, really. Again, it is in line with the fact that I am inspired by, like a lot of like old martial arts movies and stuff. Like it's in line with that, but I don't love it. I'm not necessarily trying to say too, like you need to have the strongest fingers or anything like that. So I'm looking for language that I like literal language that I like better. So as far as slogans go, and then I'm super corny with my alliteration. So I've gone full dad mode in some spots of my website, which maybe that's okay too. But I think maybe I want a little bit more pictures on here. So I'm going to jump into the mood board that I did. And so the mood board to me is basically vibe. When a product designer thinks of a mood board, it's going to be something different. And so this might not abide by, quote unquote rules of a mood board. If you're watching this and you're a, graphic designer or, product designer, whatever, you went to school for industrial design or something. But so this is, I think though, however, I'm using it perfectly for me. So if you don't want to call it a mood board, that's fine. But so again, I'm going to point out some things I like about pictures and stuff that I found online that I would like to use for draw more specifically from inspiration. So it's no surprise that I like the anime Berserk. I've named products after characters that are in the Berserk anime, but this is like the colorway I really like. So it's the black and the red, and just colors in between. I really like. I don't know if you call this a font or not, but the writing here for Berserk, I really like that. Maybe that's something I want to do, like a distressed Fingers of Fury logo or something could be cool. Again, another 90s anime, Akira. Also, coincidentally, the colorway is very similar. There's a little bit more colors in this. There's a little bit more greens that I might not pull from, and then here's another example of the same picture, but with more red. So you can kind of get a feel for like, do you keep the background black or do you go more lean on red more? I'm probably more on this side. Darker the better for me. I really like this. This is like kind of, I like the super square cornered fonts here. So they've got something that looks pretty similar to the font that I end up using for Fingers of Fury. And then also something that I pick up on this that I like is kerning, which is the space in between the fonts. Again, I am no graphic designer, but I at least know the word kerning. But the tightness of these letters, that's something that for whatever reason, when I look at a font, I really like a very tight kerning, and the Fingers of Fury font has that as well. So I really like this a lot. So this is something that's cool that I could draw from. This picture I like. Again, we're back to Berserk as inspiration, but all black and red. I really like that. I like just this whole image. Basically, in the back of my head, I'm like, it would be cool to have this drawn, but with Guts, this character lifting like a big boss or something like that. That'd be cool. So I do have, in the past, I've been really into Jeeps and cars and stuff. So I've always liked this logo, the old Champion logo, and having a distress to it as well. So I don't know if that I'll ever use this in the future, but again, this could be inspiration that maybe I have a logo with a similar colorway, maybe not in these ratios of these colors, but these are the colors that I like, and I do like that it's like a geometric based pattern. And then I think this is basically what I'm leaning on for a color palette. It might not be at this exact basically what I might want is a darker gray and a darker red. I do like that the white is an off white. It's not a straight white. So then pulling again from automotive stuff. In the past, I've worked for garages. I've had my name on name patches. So I kind of like the idea of drawing at least clothing inspiration. Maybe I put this on a chalk bag. Not that I necessarily think I'm going to sell chalk bags, but I might want a chalk bag for all of my photography. So again, I always have like a chalk bag for a scene that I'm creating when I'm doing the photography. So maybe that's something you put on a chalk bag. And then I am thinking also, so when I do photography, there should be more red in it. I've got like a blue, purple chalk bag right now. And when I take a picture, I'm just wearing whatever I'm wearing. Maybe I'll throw on a Fingers of Fury shirt, but maybe I should think about that more in what I'm wearing as well. So when I take something, a picture that is for Fingers of Fury, maybe I have a colorway that works with my color palette as well, and just keep everything on brand. So here's a few jackets. I was thinking of ways that I could make that happen. So jackets was an idea. I've gotten here a link to a Dickies jacket that actually exists, because these are pictures of jackets that I'm not going to be able to get a hold of. A shirt that I think is cool, not 100% in the colorway, but again, more automotive inspired, if that's kind of something I try leaning on. Back to anime, big surprise, another 90s anime, and specifically I always loved the Swordfish, this spacecraft, I guess you'd call it. I really like the proportions of it. The color, obviously, red again. Black sky in the background. I really like this picture. I don't know how I would use this for inspiration, but I like it. Here, I do like this logo. Maybe yellow isn't correct for me, but the in space thing, I like how the text gets squeezed in the center, and then there's a logo of sorts in the middle here. So I like that. Maybe as like a design concept, I'm not going to like draw the Swordfish spacecraft here or anything for Fingers of Fury, but that's something, it's cool, but it's still simple. So I like the fact that it's simple, but it's a little bit more inspiration as far as colors. It's just really cool that I'm able to think of something that I like, and then, search Google Images basically, and always find this color palette as a recurring theme. So I don't know if that's something that's always been a thing with me, that I've always liked black and red, and the things that I like happen to use that a lot, or everybody just really likes black and red, and you could probably find an example of it being used everywhere. So here's more of it for Cowboy Bebop. And then I like this picture again. A lot of things I might never use, so I don't know how I would use this as inspiration. And then I miswrote a quote from Cowboy Bebop here. The real quote is, "You're gonna carry that weight," if you've ever seen the show. And I think maybe that was like the closing thing that it said in the show, but I forget that or not. But again, I pointed out that I didn't like the slogan that I have now, so I wrote this here as a thought. This is way too corny, way too not. It's not thought out to make this anything, but I like the message behind "you're going to carry that weight" in the show. So I want to riff off of this idea. So this is just in here as something to riff off of, so I put it in there to remind myself later to think about it. And then finally, I've got The Street Fighter by Sonny Chiba. So this is nothing to do with the video game. This is like a 1970s martial arts movie with Sonny Chiba. This is an absolute cult classic. I love this movie. I think the first video I uploaded, or maybe the second video I uploaded to YouTube, I thought that I'd have to put like music in it and be more professional. And I actually took the fight song from this, an old 70s movies. They would always have the same fight song. Anytime that they were about to fight, they'd start playing that song, and that's the song that I put in the background for the music. I've always loved this movie. Again, it's a cult classic, and when I was looking for the font for Fingers of Fury originally, I was looking for something that reminded me of this, and obviously I'm not going to find the exact font, but I found the font that I ended up using, and again, you can see that tight kerning. These letters are very close together, so that was something that I really liked. I didn't use a font like this where you can see the kerning is more spaced out, so I really like the tight kerning on this font, and I actually like the fuzziness to it of these old school. I don't know if they're screen printed or hand drawn on on the film or what, but I really like this, and I liked the red. The first picture that I uploaded to the Fingers of Fury Instagram account, you can see it's just a picture of me using the Big Boss. That was the first prototype, and I made it like a black and white or like lo-fi filter or whatever just on my iPhone, and I threw this, not this, but I threw the font in red on top of that. I really liked the contrast there. So that's something that's always been in the back of my head that I liked. But again, this is about making things more, having more continuity, having like just like a set vibe to pull from. So not having a blue chalk bag sometimes in the background of a picture, just like always having this well thought out continuity for my brand. And that's the whole point of this whole thing, is just to be consistent with my branding, my language, everything, and to kind of have it worked out all in the back end. So everything from now on moving forward will really be consistent, right? So as I run ads or continue to do YouTube videos, like whatever it may be, it's always consistently Fingers of Fury. So if I do shirts or whatever, not that I'm going to become a clothing company or anything like that, it's just that I've got that consistency down where something comes from the brand Fingers of Fury, and I just want to get that ironed out now as I am looking to grow, right? So I just want to have that ironed out and set, just to look, not necessarily that I'm trying to look as professional as possible, because I still want to be, coming from me. But I do want to make sure I understand my own vision appropriately and work it out now rather than try and fumble with it later. And I think now is the perfect time. So that's where I was going with that. And, hopefully I explained it well enough for people that aren't familiar with a process like this, but also for people that are, maybe there's input, and I'm 100% open to input, or how you guys get ideas like this, or bounce ideas off of other people. Whatever your methodology might be, I'm open to it. So I've liked to kind of learn how other professions think about things and stuff. So I was open to learning more about processes that I'm not an expert in. So anyways, that is it for now. So hope that was enjoyable for you. This is a bit different of a video for me, and I've just figured out how to do this screen recording thing. So hopefully everything turned out, good. So thanks for watching.